Nowadays, we name things not really considering its value, its meaning, or who it offends. One perfect example of this is between the team, the Redskins, Washington Redskins, and a group of Native Americans. We must stop offending this group and look into how the sports teams named after this group hurts specifically Native Americans and how it offends them. We must also work together to have these names removed and stop them from circulating in the media. First of all, I want to look into how Native Americans are offended by these certain names and why they offend them. Second of all, I also want to go into how Native Americans feel that their rights are being ignored and how they really aren't taken seriously. And lastly, I also want to consider why it is so important that we change these names and how it's going to positively impact Native Americans. For my first point, I want to go into how Native Americans feel offended because of the imagery portrayed by these names. One example was actually posted by Aaron Stanley from Fergus Falls Daily Journal, named Redskins Name Change Supporters Carry Weight, which was published in 2013. And here it explains that a Minnesota congresswoman demanded that the Washington Redskins abandon their name and cease to exploit for profit a racial slur. She scolded the owner, Daniel Snyder, and his commissioner, Roger Goodell, for attempting to justify this racial slur. And why it was offensive was because Redskins were traced to a time back in history where usually Native Americans were named this after being skinned. Obviously, their skin would, their muscles underneath would be red, and so the conquerors would proudly carry the skins and show them off, naming Native Americans Redskins afterwards. And so these two men tried covering having to change their team name by getting and gathering Native Americans from around their area and making them support their team name, not to change it, and that it wasn't really important. They supposedly also lured a chief Native American, which they later found out that he wasn't really a chief. As a matter of fact, he wasn't even 1/4 Native, and his name Chief was actually just a nickname. Which also leads me to my second point, which is about this group of Native Americans who got angered after this whole deal with the Redskins team, and they decided they were going to fight for it. So they fought this for 17 years in court, and so they decided to take it to a Supreme Court, but they were denied because the Supreme Court considered this not a very important subject and that it wasn't really a useful thing that they would waste their time in. And so this group of Native Americans felt that they were being ignored and that their rights weren't really listened to, and that they really didn't have any support from anyone. And so this angered them a bit even more, and they decided to begin doing rallies in front of the Redskins' whole sport team games outside their stadium whenever they play. And for my third point, I also want to discuss how if we get rid of these sport team names, it will greatly affect Native Americans in a very positive way. One of the reasons is that they want to get rid of this sports names is explained in an article by ATNDS named The Dark Side of Sports Symbols, which was published in 2001. And it says that the symbols surrounding sports teams are very important because they set up the patterns of social dominance in society, which means that by this team naming their team Redskins, they're putting Native Americans lower in status and making other ethnic groups seem higher. And so if Native Americans believe that if these names are taken away or changed into less offensive names, then they will feel like they're equal with all other ethnic groups and not really being downgraded or anything. And so This is why we have to work on first being aware of how these names offend Native Americans and how it also makes them feel downgraded. And helping these unheard people have a proper hearing in court will make them feel like they actually have rights and that they are being listened to and that there's someone who actually cares. As well as if we focus on ending these sports names, then we can be a bit sensitive more to this certain ethnic group and help actually reduce a lot of the stereotypes out there portraying to them.